The spring rain cascaded over Boston like a relentless curtain, washing away the remnants of a harsh winter. It was a Tuesday morning, and the city buzzed with its usual rhythm commuters, hurrying under umbrellas, cars splashing through puddles on Cambridge Street. Layla Martin, a 27-year-old woman with long brown hair tied back in a practical ponytail and piercing green eyes that held a mix of determination and weariness, huddled under the shelter of the bus stop awning. She clutched a worn leather briefcase in one hand, its contents her last lifeline, a resume polished to perfection, recommendation letters from past employers, and a fragile thread of hope. The interview at Whitmore and Blake Innovations was scheduled for 9:00 a.m., her final shot after submitting applications to over 20 companies in the past few months. If this fell through, she'd lose her tiny apartment in Dorchester, the only stable thing in her life since her parents' passing. Layla checked her watch, 8:12. 8. The rain drummed steadily on the metal roof above her, mirroring the pounding in her chest. Her thin coat did little to ward off the chill, but she stood straight, refusing to let the weather break her resolve. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, pulling her from her thoughts. She fished it out the screen, lighting up with a message from her landlord. "Friday's the deadline, Layla. Can't hold the room if you don't pay up." Her stomach twisted. Rent was overdue by 2 weeks, and her savings had dwindled to nothing. She typed a quick reply, working on it, but deleted it, knowing it was futile. Instead, she stared blankly at the traffic, the wipers on passing cars swishing back and forth like metronomes counting down her time. That's when it happened. A sleek black SUV pulled up abruptly across the street, its engine sputtering, before a plume of smoke escaped from under the hood. The driver, a tall man in his mid-30s dressed in a sharp suit that screamed professionalism, stepped out, his dark hair quickly matting against his forehead in the downpour. He popped the hood, peering inside with a frustrated expression, his hands gesturing helplessly as he tried to assess the damage. The rain pounded harder, turning the scene into a blurry mess. Layla didn't intend to get involved. She had her own crisis brewing, and the bus was due any minute. She glanced at her watch again, 8:15. Plenty of time if she stayed put. But something in the man's posture, the way he stood alone, exposed to the elements without a single passerby slowing down, tugged at her. A memory flashed unbidden 3 years ago, her mother stranded on a rainy night with a broken-down car. No one had stopped. Her mother had suffered a heart attack that night, collapsing on the roadside before help arrived too late. The guilt of not being there still haunted Layla, a sharp reminder of how indifference could cost lives. The man looked up, scanning the street for anyone who might help. His eyes met hers across the road, desperate but polite, not demanding. "Excuse me," he called over the roar of the rain. "Could you possibly help me call a tow truck? My phone's dead." It was a simple request, nothing forceful. Yet in that moment, it felt like a crossroads. Layla could ignore him, stay dry under the awning, and make her interview on time. Or she could step out, risk getting soaked, and potentially derail her day. The bus rumbled in the distance, approaching. She bit her lip, weighing the options. Her briefcase felt heavier, the papers inside a reminder of everything at stake. But the memory of her mother won out. With a deep breath, Layla stepped from under the shelter, the rain immediately drenching her coat and seeping into her shoes. She crossed the street carefully, dodging puddles, and approached the man. Up close, he looked even more disheveled. His tie loosened, sleeves rolled up despite the cold. "I'll call for you," she said, her voice steady, despite the tremor from the chill. "Here, take my umbrella." He accepted it gratefully, holding it over both of them as she pulled out her phone. "Thank you," he said, his voice carrying a genuine warmth that cut through the storm. I'm Jace, by the way. I really appreciate this. Layla nodded, dialing the tow service while the rain continued its assault. As she waited on hold, she glanced at her watch again. 8:20. The bus had come and gone without her. Her heart sank, but she pushed the thought aside. This was the right thing to do, or so she told herself. Little did she know this act of kindness in the midst of chaos would unravel a chain of events far beyond a simple tow truck call. More than 25 minutes passed in the relentless downpour before the tow truck finally arrived, its yellow lights cutting through the gray haze like a reluctant beacon. Layla stood there, thoroughly soaked, her thin coat clinging to her skin like a second unwelcome layer. Her hair hung in heavy dripping strands and water trickled down her face, blurring her vision. The briefcase in her hand felt twice as heavy now, the leather slick and cold. Inside the papers, her resume, her carefully crafted cover letter, the recommendations she had begged for were undoubtedly ruined, the ink bleeding into illegible smudges from the relentless rain. The man Jace, as he had introduced himself, watched the tow truck operator hook up his SUV, his expression a mix of relief and lingering frustration. He turned to Layla, noticing her drenched state for what seemed like the first time. "Oh, you have somewhere to be?" he asked quietly, his voice carrying over the hum of the engine and the patter of rain. Layla hesitated, not wanting to burden a stranger with her problems, but honesty won out. She sighed, wiping water from her eyes. "I had an interview at a big tech company. I might be late now." His brow furrowed, a flicker of guilt crossing his features. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have dragged you into this." She managed a small, sad smile, shaking her head. "You didn't drag me. It's just, I was putting everything on this morning." Her voice trailed off the weight of her words, hanging in the air like the mist rising from the warm asphalt. Jace paused, then slowly shrugged off his own wet jacket, draping it over her shoulders despite her protests. He handed back her umbrella, now barely useful. "Thank you for not turning away like everyone else," he said, his tone sincere, almost vulnerable. "Most people would have kept walking." Layla nodded, accepting the gesture without further words. She watched as he climbed into the tow truck, the vehicle pulling away with a groan, leaving her alone on the slick sidewalk. The rain showed no signs of letting up, and her watch now read 8:45, far too late. Panic surged through her, but she pushed it down, breaking into a run toward the offices of Whitmore and Blake Innovations, her shoes squelching with every step. By the time she arrived, breathless and disheveled, she was nearly 50 minutes late. The lobby was pristine marble floors gleaming under fluorescent lights, the air conditioned and dry. The receptionist, a middle-aged woman with a tight bun and an even tighter expression, eyed Layla from head to toe, taking in her sodden appearance with undisguised disdain. "The interview panel has already wrapped up," she said coolly, not bothering to check her computer. "They didn't leave any messages." Layla's heart plummeted. She tried to explain the rain, the broken-down car, the act of kindness, but the words tumbled out incoherently, her voice shaky from the cold and disappointment. The receptionist merely shrugged, uninterested. As Layla turned to leave, defeated, she noticed something on the front desk, her black umbrella propped neatly against the counter. Beside it was a small folded note in elegant handwriting. "I don't know your name, but I wish I could thank you properly." She picked it up, unfolding the paper with trembling fingers. The words blurred slightly from the dampness, but their meaning was clear. Layla stood there for a long moment, the lobby's sterile quiet pressing in on her. She had sacrificed her one shot at stability for a stranger's momentary need, an act that anyone else might call foolish. Friends had warned her about being too soft-hearted, about prioritizing others over her own survival in a cutthroat city like Boston. And now here she was jobless, broke and facing eviction. Yet as she clutched the note and umbrella stepping back into the rain, a strange calm settled over her. Regret lingered sharp and insistent, but it didn't consume her. Why didn't she feel the bitterness she expected? Deep down, she knew turning away would have haunted her more than any missed interview. The rain continued to fall, washing the streets clean, but Layla walked home with a quiet resolve, unaware that her simple choice had set something irreversible in motion. The next day dawned clearer, the rain having finally subsided into a misty haze over Boston's streets. Layla sat in the quiet confines of the public library, her laptop open to job listings that blurred together in a sea of unpromising opportunities. The events of the previous morning replayed in her mind, the ruined interview, the stranger's note, but she pushed them aside, focusing on survival. Her savings were dwindling and desperation gnawed at her. She scrolled through postings for entry-level positions, her fingers hovering over the submit button for yet another application. Her phone vibrated on the table, startling her. The caller ID showed an unfamiliar number with a Boston area code. She answered hesitantly. "Hello. This is from Whitmore and Blake Innovations," a professional voice said on the other end. "Our CEO has requested a follow-up interview with you. Would you be available tomorrow morning?" Layla's breath caught. It had to be a mistake. Perhaps they had the wrong candidate. I was late yesterday. The panel had already finished." The voice remained steady. "We're aware. The CEO specifically asked for you. 9:00 a.m. sharp. We'll see you then." The call ended before she could ask more. Layla stared at her phone, her mind racing. A second chance. It seemed too good to be true, but she couldn't afford to question it. That night, she prepared meticulously, ironing a borrowed suit from a friend, practicing answers in the mirror, and setting 3 alarms to ensure she wouldn't be late again. The following morning, she arrived at the sleek glass tower of Whitmore and Blake Innovations. 15 minutes early, her hair neatly pinned up the suit, fitting just right. The receptionist, the same one from before, raised an eyebrow but directed her to the waiting area without comment. Moments later, Karen Blake, the director of Human Resources, a stern woman in her 50s with sharp features and a no-nonsense demeanor, emerged from a side door. "Follow me," she said curtly, leading Layla down a polished hallway, lined with modern art and frosted glass offices. In the conference room, Karen gestured for her to sit. The air was cool and sterile, scented faintly with coffee from somewhere nearby. Karen's eyes narrowed as she flipped through a file, Layla's soggy application from the day before. "Kindness is admirable." Karen began, her tone clipped. "But this company thrives on discipline, not impulsivity. We need people who prioritize commitments." Layla met her gaze steadily, refusing to shrink. "I understand that. But if I hadn't stopped that day, I'd be living with the regret of turning away from someone in need. It would have haunted me more than any missed meeting." Karen opened her mouth to respond, perhaps to challenge her further, but the door swung open before she could. A man entered, tall, composed in a gray suit that accentuated his broad shoulders. His dark hair was neatly combed and his eyes held a quiet intensity. Layla's heart skipped a beat. It was him, the stranger from the rain, the one whose car had broken down. Karen stood abruptly, smoothing her blazer. "Mr. Whitmore, I wasn't expecting." He waved her off gently, his attention shifting to Layla. She remained seated, frozen in place, piecing it together. "I'm Jace Whitmore," he said, his voice calm and authoritative, "CEO of this company." The room seemed to tilt for Layla. Karen glanced between them, confusion etching her features, but Jace continued without pause. He looked around the table as if addressing an invisible audience, then fixed his gaze on Layla. Yesterday, I was just a man in trouble. No title, no business card, and she helped me without expecting anything in return. Not because she had to, but because it was the right thing to do. He turned fully to her, now his expression softening. I'm not offering you this interview out of gratitude. I'm offering it because we need people like you here, honest, brave, and principled, even when no one's watching. Layla dove into her new role at Whitmore and Blake Innovations with a quiet intensity that quickly earned her respect among her colleagues. As a coordinator in the internal culture department, she was tasked with fostering connections among the staff, organizing team building events, developing training programs on empathy and collaboration, and ensuring the company's values weren't just words on a poster, but lived experiences. Her office was a modest cubicle on the fifth floor filled with sticky notes of ideas and a small plant she'd bought to remind herself of growth amid uncertainty. She worked long hours, arriving early and leaving late, her dedication fueled by gratitude for the second chance and a determination to prove her worth. Jace, on the other hand, maintained a professional distance at first. As CEO, his days were a whirlwind of meetings, strategy sessions, and decisions that shaped the company's future in the competitive tech landscape. Yet their paths crossed more often than coincidence would allow, in the elevator during all hands meetings or in the break room where he'd grab a quick coffee. Amidurge. Each encounter was brief but charged with unspoken recognition. How's the day treating you? He'd ask, his tone casual, but his eyes lingering a moment longer than necessary. Layla found herself drawn to him not just because of his position, but because of the glimpses she caught of the man beneath the executive facade. In staff emails, he emphasized work-life balance. In conversations she overheard, he spoke of innovation with a passion that hinted at personal stakes. One afternoon, during a casual chat in the hallway, he opened up slightly. I lost my parents young, he admitted, staring out the window at the Boston skyline. Built this company to prove I could stand on my own, but sometimes it feels like I'm still that kid trying to control everything. His vulnerability resonated with Layla's own losses, her mother's untimely death, the isolation that followed. I get it, she replied softly. After my mom passed, I promised myself I'd never ignore someone in need. It's why I stopped that day. Their bond deepened subtly through shared moments rather than grand gestures. At a company retreat, Layla led a workshop on everyday empathy, sharing anonymized stories of kindness that had changed lives. As she spoke about a rainy day when a stranger's plea tested her priorities, the room fell silent. I learned that true strength isn't in sticking to a schedule, she said, her voice steady, but in choosing compassion when it's easiest to walk away. When she stepped off the stage, Jace was waiting in the wings, away from the crowd. You didn't just change my morning that day, he said, his voice low and earnest. You shifted how I see leadership here. We're implementing your ideas, company-wide programs that reward acts of kindness, not just metrics. Layla felt a warmth spread through her, a mix of pride and something deeper. I'm just doing my job, she demurred, but her eyes met his, holding the gaze. As weeks turned into months, their interactions evolved. A shared lunch turned into discussions about books. They'd read hers on human psychology, his on innovative business models. He confided in her about the pressures of running a company, the loneliness at the top. She opened up about her struggles with grief and financial instability. You've taught me that opening up isn't a weakness, he told her one evening in the empty office, the city lights twinkling outside. It's what builds real connections. In that quiet admission, Layla saw the shift not just in him but in herself. What started as an act of kindness in the rain had blossomed into mutual understanding, a foundation for something profound. The heart, she realized, had its own timeline, deciding when to let someone in. 3 months flew by in a blur of progress and quiet fulfillment for Layla at Whitmore and Blake Innovations. Her innovative programs had taken root, transforming the company's culture one workshop at a time. The Empathy in Action initiative, which she now led as the newly promoted head of corporate culture, encouraged employees to share stories of kindness and incorporate them into daily operations. It was Jace's brainchild, but Layla had breathed life into it, drawing from her own experiences to make it resonate. Colleagues sought her advice, and the office buzzed with a newfound sense of community. For the first time in years, Layla felt secure not just financially, with her steady paycheck covering rent and more, but emotionally, as if she belonged. One Friday evening, as the weekend loomed, a small envelope appeared on her desk from the CEO's office. Inside was a simple card: "Meet me on the rooftop at 7:20, no meetings involved." Her heart fluttered with curiosity and a hint of anticipation. She arrived promptly, stepping out onto the rooftop terrace where the Boston skyline stretched before her, the city lights twinkling like stars brought down to earth. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of distant rain, though the sky was clear now. Jace was already there, leaning against the railing in a casual button-down, shirt sleeves rolled up. He turned as she approached, a soft smile breaking across his face. "You came," he said, his voice warm against the evening chill. "Of course," Layla replied, joining him at the edge. The view was breathtaking, the Charles River reflecting the glow of buildings, the hum of traffic far below like a distant lullaby. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a new umbrella, sleek, black, and sturdy. "I never properly replaced yours," he said, handing it to her. "But this isn't just about that." Layla took it, her fingers brushing his. "You didn't have to." "I did," he insisted, his gaze steady. "That day in the rain, I wasn't just stranded with a broken car. I was questioning everything: my leadership, my isolation. You didn't know who I was, and you helped anyway. It made me realize I've been controlling too much, shutting people out." He took a deep breath, stepping closer. "You've shown me that sometimes you have to pause, let go, and open up. If you'll allow it, I'd like to walk beside you. Not as your CEO, but as someone who's been changed by your kindness." Layla's breath caught her eyes, searching his. The vulnerability in his words mirrored her own journey from loss and struggle to this moment of possibility. She smiled softly, radiant like sunlight piercing through clouds after a storm. "I never imagined an umbrella in the rain could alter a destiny," she whispered. Jace chuckled gently, taking her hand. "It wasn't the umbrella, it was the person who offered it." They stood there, hands intertwined, gazing at the city below. No more words were needed in that instant. The connection they'd built brick by brick spoke for itself. The rain from that fateful day had washed away old barriers, paving the way for a new beginning. For both of them, it was a promise of companionship, growth, and the quiet power of choosing kindness in a world that often rushed past it. As the night deepened, Layla leaned into him, feeling the warmth of possibility wrap around her like a gentle embrace.